Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of audit. For the benefit of those watching on YouTube, members of the committee are present in the chamber, and these members will be voting on proposals this evening. Other members of the council are also in attendance and are participating via MS Teams and can take part in discussions, ask questions, but they cannot vote. Your attention is drawn to agenda item 1, which sets out guidance on how meetings will be conducted, including ground rules. Before we start, we get the DSO to confirm attendance of voting members in the chamber.
Thank you, Chair. When I call your name, please can you confirm that you are present? We have received apologies from the Chair, Councillor Cannon, who's been substituted by Councillor Tunstall. Councillor Rose?
Present.
Councillor Bishop?
Present.
Councillor Clokey?
Present.
Councillor Hood?
Present.
We have received an apology from Councillor Luck, who's been substituted by Councillor Hammond.
Present.
Councillor Perry?
Present.
I can confirm we have 7 voting members present. Thanks.
Very much. Just before we go to notification substitute, although we've done that technically, I'll just get officers to introduce themselves, please, starting on my right.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Sharon Shelton, the Director of Finance and Information.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Paul Worden. I'm the Chief Financial Services Officer.
Good evening, I'm John O'Reilly, Principal Accountant.
Evening, everybody. Amanda Riley, Principal Accountant.
Good evening, Karen Herbert, Deputy Audit Manager.
Evening, Richard Benjamin, Internal Audit Manager.
Value One, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you very much, everybody. Excellent. We've done notification of substitute members. Declarations of interest. Any members want to declare anything? Councillor Clokey, declare away.
As I continue in relation to item 7, the Treasury Management, to be employed by Fidelity, who are the fund managers for one of the funds we invest in.
Very much. Minutes. I will ask you whether I can sign these minutes that are on the table here. You all read them in your papers, and can I sign them?
Read.
Thank you very much. Okay, as the agenda is quite large, I've got a paper copy. You haven't. I have asked members, I have officers, if they will, when they refer to tables or pages or blah, blah, to state the page number so you can race to it and not have to struggle. Which takes us straight on to agenda item 6, page 19. This is called risk management. And if anybody wants to speak on this at all, please keep to the subject. Thank you very much.
You happy for me to introduce, Chairman?
Mrs. Shelton,
That's
please
all right.
carry on.
That's no problem. Okay, so this report this evening, standard report, as you know, to the committee, but this time it's dealing with 3 things. The update on the as we do, and that's the main item of this paper. But there's also an update on progress to achieving the recommendations review that you had this time last year, I think. And finally, there's a request that you agree to deferring the update of the risk strategy to a later meeting cycle. The reasons are moment. But dealing with the strategic risk register first, as you'll see from the report and indeed the annexes report, the good news is that we have now reduced the number of red risks to 3, which is good. And last time there was 4. So procurement is no longer presenting itself as a risk, and that's because we've made significant progress, certainly since the last meeting, in terms of adopting procurement strategy in December. So that no longer, we don't feel, that's really good news. But we do still have 3 red risks, as you'll see from the report. First being the savings and transformation strategy, Sadly, I don't think I can downgrade that list of things. Saving make. So I'm afraid that stays on. Have that. We've got failure to agree a local plan, and just to say, you've probably spotted him on the screen, but James Bailey is here to answer any questions you've got on that particular. Because last time expressed an update from directly on that, so no doubt James will speak shortly. And then the third one, Agile, spoken about before. There is, of course, one risk that isn't on our papers, thinking about it, and that's all about the devolution, reorganisation agenda that has emerged rather rapidly, actually, over the last couple of months. In fact, probably before since we actually prepared this report. So it's not that we haven't recognised that as a risk, it's just that at the time of preparing this, it really wasn't there. The other thing to say is that at the moment, of course, it is a white paper, not yet reality, although I'm not sure how long it's going to be before it does become reality. But rest assured, next time you get these strategic, sure, it will feature on. Okay, thank you. We're trying again. Right, so that's the strategic risk register, and I'm sure James will come in a moment to talk about the local plan. But the next section is about the Zurich risk review that we had. Again, progress has been made on that. There is an annex setting out details of that. But inevitably, there has been slippage on a couple of areas. And part of that is because we have decided to set up an officer risk champions group. So I'm going to be the lead, or I am the lead risk champion from the officer side. As you might remember, I think it was at your last meeting, you appointed the chairman as the member risk champion. So the officer risk champion group has met once, but as a group, we will be taking forward a number of things together. So collectively, we will be doing that. So we will, we're asking to be able to report back on a few things in September. And that also then leads on to the final aspect, which is about updating the risk strategy, because I think, again, I need to hear from the risk champions group to have their input to that. So again, I'm asking that members endorse that we bring an update of that back to you in September. So that's all I wanted to say. I don't know whether you would wish, Chairman, for James to start talking about the local plan now, or whether members wish to ask questions first.
I think we'll ask James if you'd like to say something, please, now.
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully, good evening, members. Thanks for the opportunity to address your committee. Yes, I mean, in the papers annex, I've got open annex 1A. In terms of the risk that we got, the reputational risk around not being able to agree a local plan. And obviously, we've got an agenda item coming up in terms of H&P on the 12th of February, which is going to effectively set out sort of the budgetary proposals for the local plan. It'll also set out the framework in terms of how we see the local plan moving forward in terms of the local development scheme. And what we have put in more recently is an engagement strategy in terms of trying to reduce these elements of risk. And obviously in the other columns within the annexes, you'll see what mitigations we put in place to reduce the elements of risk in the local plan. And part of those is getting council to agree the costings for the plan in terms of making sure that members are fully engaged in the process, so there's no surprises coming forward as we move forward in terms of the local plan progression. But obviously one of the key risks around there is the time framing Obviously, we've got to work towards 12th of December 2026 is a critical time frame that we're working towards to submit the plan to the planning inspector. And that obviously has its implications. So whilst we've put risks in place, whilst we've put mitigations in place to reduce those risks, we can't eliminate it. And unfortunately, we can't reduce the overall risk on the strategic risk register because there are inherent risks going through the process. And some of those, hopefully, we get political agreement. That's part and parcel why we've looked at the engagement strategy. So, as I said, no surprises coming forward to members. So hopefully we can take members along with the journey. But then there's also a spatial strategy that we need to agree is where we're going to put our increased housing numbers. Our housing numbers have increased to 1,097 per annum in terms of delivery. That takes us over 20,000 over a plan period. That's not, there are some unpopular choices that need to be made going forward. So I'm not going to sort of say, whilst we can put mitigations in place, we can't reduce those risks overall because some elements we can't control, but we do what we possibly can, and we'll keep members engaged in the process as much as we can to reduce those risks going forward. I'm happy to take any questions, Chairman, if members have got any specific questions on local plan matters.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Members. Councillor Hood.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. In the event that we're able to stick with the timetable and we submit our plan to the inspector, and then it goes to hearings, but then this council is no longer for the exists for the hearings, and we're part of the brave new world of the unitary councils. I take it that the unitary council just handles the hearing process rather than, with the thing doesn't just end, but the unitary council takes over. I'm just
Bailey.
They'd need to lay in legislation in order to take account of that, because currently the powers are devolved to Tunbridge and Moor Powers Council. So there would need to be primary legislation through the Planning and Infrastructure bill to come forward in terms of, and all other acts that they'd have to lay in terms of for that legislation to come forward. All we know is that the government have said, don't stop making your plans, move forward at pace as quickly as you possibly can, and we'll have to deal with those matters as they come forward. So the instructions that we're getting from government is just carry on and move forward, and the legislation will catch up in due course.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Perry.
Just wondered, what are the implications and the downsides of not having it done by the December 26? And are there any advantages in view of what's happening with devolution of not getting it done by then and waiting to see what we're faced with in a bigger area?
I mean, the Chairman, if I could answer, sorry.
Carry on.
Yeah, I mean, the issues in terms of not meeting the requirements, the 12th of December 2026 is a date imposed as for current style local plans. So it's based on the current framework that we're running with. In terms of, I mean, there are examples in terms of spatial strategies, in terms of sustainability appraisals, habitats assessment. If we go past that deadline date and we don't submit, we'd be under the new style submission of local plans. And as I said, the detail of that has not been published because that hasn't been released at this time. So we'd be in effect a guinea pig amongst some other councils who have decided the decision, and they've taken a decision not to submit their local plan under the current local plan auspices. So we, members have given a very clear direction previously that they want us to progress with the local plan at pace, and they want us to meet it under the current local plan arrangements. So that's where we're working to. In terms of if we don't submit a plan at all, you're into special measures, and the government have been very clear. There is a paper coming to H&P on the 12th of February which sets out the implications of the MPPF and what are those implications on TNBC. I mean, obviously one of them, if we don't progress at pace, the government can intervene, and the government have shown a very clear intention to intervene in local authorities that don't want to progress with plan making. So, and that means that there's all sorts of measures that the government can impose on us if we don't meet those timescales for plan delivery.
Thank you. Interesting. Members, Councillor Clokey and then Councillor Bishop.
I just wanted to confirm, what's our next key milestone? When are we targeting for it, and are we on track for it?
Chairman, that will be set out in the H&P report on the 12th, which was our local development, in terms of our local development scheme. That will set out our trajectory moving forward. What we're aiming for is obviously that is purely based on a 12th of December 2026 submission. And obviously by if members agree the LDS, which I can't say at this time, obviously that's for H&P to recommend on to Cabinet. If that is agreed, that will be the timeline that we're working towards. And that's a fundamental requirement of legislation that we set out and publish a local development scheme.
Mr. Bailey.
Answered my question. It was about the forecast and going forward, and will we hit that target? I think.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay, right. On page 19 and 20, there are recommendations. Please note the last one, present an updated risk management strategy to the September meeting. So can I have your support for all those? Oh, Councillor Clokey?
Yeah, I had questions on other parts of the risk strategy that weren't planning. Sorry.
Maybe you should have indicated, Councillor,
Sorry.
by raising your hand.
Sorry.
Councillor Clokey.
I just wanted to ask, obviously there wasn't time to get the risk from local gov reorg onto the risk register in time, but given it's obviously quite a big impact, is there any way we could get a quick rundown of what we see as the key risk and impact from it? Or are we too early to say?
I think it's far too early to say that yet. I mean, we're still gathering information about what it all means. I think, as you probably know, Council and Medway Council have indicated they wish to go for the priority programme. They will know, or we will all know by the end of January whether they're on it or not. And I think once we know that, things might start tumbling out a bit more. But at the moment, it's all a bit difficult to assess. But by the time you get your next report, which I think is April, hopefully that will be on the register and more of a discussion about it. And I'm sure there'll be other opportunities in other places as well.
So at the moment, mostly our sort of categorization of the risk is there is a thing going on and there's a lot of uncertainty. And that presumably was going to feed into a whole bunch of other risks. So I know we have a risk on the register for staff retention, etc. In fact, Chair, I did have a question about the Zurich recommendation part. Are we on there yet, or do you want to finish at this point? You mentioned that we've pushed some things back. In fact, have we pushed everything that's not already done back to September?
Councillor, I can answer that. Yes, we had, simply because the establishment of the risk group. We met in November. We're about to meet again in February, and we need to get the those involved with that involved in this process quite significantly. If I was to go ahead and write the strategy now, only to have a significant revisions done by the other members of the group, it's taken me on that I didn't need to do. So we've taken the decision to delay it to get everybody involved from the services to say, okay, this is what we need to do and how we need to progress.
Thanks. There was one other thing on the Zurich one on point 11, which is listed to be completed in November 24. The current status is consideration to be made following officer training in October. Is that actually done?
I can confirm risk management training was delivered by Zurich to all officers in October. There was 2 specific dates given, and anybody who was listed on above a certain grade and above was required to attend that training.
Brilliant. And I had, sorry, I've got a few questions noted. I had one other question about the annex that's got the ongoing risks and risks identified. On page 35, if that's helpful. So these are the ones that I think should be risks identified since September, if I'm understanding the report. We've got a few on there for elections that are, an election will take place in July. Are they just sort of legacy entries that have made their way over through a copy paste or something? All right. Okay. Thanks.
Barry.
Mine was just about the Annex 2 as well. On page 36, I think it mentions, oh no, hang on, is it 37? Yes, 37, it mentions temporary accommodation. And I'm just curious as to why that appears, well, I mean, it's fine that it appears there, but why it doesn't appear on the strategic risk register, because we spoke about this in September, and I remember being alarmed that they said that we said that without mitigating intervention, it was predicted that there'd be a 665,000 overspend, and I remember being particularly alarmed about it. But why doesn't, in view of that, it appear on the strategic risk register? What am I not understanding?
Okay, it does appear on the strategic risk register. It's just its name is different. So on the strategic risk register, the name is, I'm just looking for it. It's number 10. It's sustained or increasing levels of housing need. So it encompasses more than just the temporary accommodation. It's about housing need in general, but temporary accommodation is part of that risk.
Surprised it's not got a higher score then.
I think it is a wider risk than just TA. So you've got housing, you've got affordable housing, you've got all sorts of different housing need and temporary accommodation. There's an awful lot of things that are happening temporary accommodation at the moment, some which will be coming to you in the not too distant future. So the assessment by the management team that we have got this, we've actually got local authority housing fund money to help us deliver some of that, which we have to spend by March 26th. So there is a programme. So I don't think it's a red risk, and neither obviously does the Director of Housing, and neither does the management as a whole. But obviously if something goes wrong with that, then we may have to escalate that to a level of risk. But at the moment, we don't think it's a red risk. I mean, the risk is about the cost that we're spending, which is also captured in other risks on the strategic risk register as well. For example, under the budget deficit position and the savings and transformation strategy. So I think we've covered it. It's just in different aspects within the risk register.
Berkey.
Last question, I think. On Agile, I know there was a plan to do some lessons learned reviews, retrospectives, whatever you want to call them. And I think they were going to be split out by the 2 phases. And I think the expectation was that that was going to come to this committee. Do we know if that's still planned, and what the I think from the audit report later on said that the APAS review was ongoing at the time that was written. Do we know what the timeline on that is?
So yeah, so you're right. The first internal audit report, lessons learned or whatever the title was, has been done. And I'm sure Richard may say something about that a little bit later. And Richard and his colleagues have been commissioned to do a further report, which is wider than just planning effect. I don't know what the timescale is. Richard, you may know what that is.
Well, Chair, so yes, there is a summary of lessons learned actions in the internal audit progress report coming later from APAS. Karen's right, we've been commissioned and we have a planning meeting booked in with Damien and Eleanor. I think it's the end of January. So hopefully by the next committee, we'll have the summary report for that.
Much. Councillor Hood, please make sure it's a question, Councillor Hood.
Yeah, my question is obviously the report is very clearly written for the events of last. You understand? It does change some of just change where we are. So when we're talking about the medium-term financial plan and our sustainability, obviously we have got to make these saving targets. We've made a commitment to make those saving targets. Given that we are likely to be tumbling into a unitary authority alongside councils that have got significant debt, how do we approach this? Because if we want to be able to in any other circumstances we want to be presenting balanced budgets. However, how can we go to our residents and say actually we're going to have to make cuts in order to balance the budget, in the knowledge that other councils in our neighbourhood are going to be bringing considerable debt with them? That's my first question.
Oh, sorry, you're not finished. Right. I think the first thing to say is we are in what I call a limbo period. It's really difficult, isn't it? Because we're hearing all these things. It's a white paper, not law, hasn't been passed. Yes, there's lots of information about dates that might have a new authority by, but we don't know yet. And for me, I have a duty to make sure that Somerset Morling exists, and until someone tells me it doesn't exist, we have a duty to carry on as is, and we have a duty to have a balanced budget, to make whatever savings we need, to be efficient, to provide value for money, etc. That is what we have to do until we are told something else, and we haven't yet been told that's something else, because this is all a bit, I don't know, yeah, it's noise. What do they call it? White noise, stuff that's going on around you, but actually it's interfering with what we're trying to achieve. Now, as the weeks and months go on, that white paper will start turning into a different colour and become something else. And at that point, I think your questions will need to start being addressed. But for now, I don't think we can or should.
Thank you, everybody. Councillor Hood, I
Yeah,
hope it's a question about risk management.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. The same, and it's the same kind of thing. I understand it's kind of business as usual, and I wouldn't expect you to answer in any other way because you're a consummate professional. We've got issues with the expenditure that's been predicted for the building to my right, and obviously I believe that all these matters are going to be coming to the relevant scrutiny committees in time, so we're going to be able to review all the elements of our forward expenditure in terms of capital projects. And then you've got elections down there as well, which falls under the same thing. We're told that by the end of this month we should know whether probably there won't be any elections. That's going to be. And my last one's probably impossible for anybody to answer, but it talks about phone signals and the way that it interferes with the ability of our car parks, because obviously they rely on Ringo. How would we address that? How would we mitigate that kind of problem? Is that something for Ofcom, or it's not something that really we can get involved in as a council? We're at the mercy of providers. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
So get yourself, Councillor. You'll have to go elsewhere for that question, and we've got plenty of time, I'm sure. Okay, then. Thanks for that, everybody. Everybody happy now? So 3-1. There are 3 recommendations. I've told you about number 3 again. Do I have your support?
Agreed.
And for those watching, that was agreed by the committee. Thank you very much. So we will now move on to agenda item 7, page 41. Treasury Management Update and Treasury Management and Annual Investment Strategy for 25-26. Donna.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. As Chair has said, you'll find this on page 41. So I'm going to jump into page 42. 5.1 indicates the interest rate forecast. So Section 5 provides details of the interest rate forecast along with some economic data for consideration. Key points being the Bank of England's MPC have initiated its easing cycle by lowering interest rates in August and November, the rate now sitting at 4.75. Markets are also expecting to see a managed reduction to the rates throughout 25-26, with interest rates settling around the 3.5% mark over the next 3 years. Looking at page 43, Section 6 covers investment performance. On 6.2, cash flow surplus averages 28.2 million a day. And again, same page, 6.3, the core investments held at the end of November was 33 million. I'm happy to report to members this has actually included an ESG deposit. The rates that were provided to us were comparable, and so we decided to put the money under an ESG. Looking on to page 44, 6.11 highlights at the end of November, cash and core investments generated interest of 2.024 million, so just over £2 million, giving a positive variance of 442,000 against the original budget. The increase in the income reflects the interest rates that have been held higher for longer than anticipated at budget setting. And these have actually been reflected in the revised budgets. So we've revised the budget upwards. Looking to page 45, on 6.17, the long-term investments, which are our property funds, generated dividends of just under 83,000. This excluded Lothbury. And on page 46, 6.20, you will find table 2 showing the current sales value of the LAPF, which is the CCLA, and the Hermes property funds to November. The table shows a net benefit for those two property funds of 423,000 since inception, when we take into consideration the dividends actually received. Looking on page 46, on 6.22, table 3 provides the current position and the break-even point in respect of the investment in the Lothbury Property Trust. At the time of writing this report, our future sales of assets and taking into consideration the dividends received, we would need to find £671,000 to recover the initial capital investment. At the end of November, we had received 4 capital payments totaling just shy of 961,000, which is slightly over 48% of the initial investment. The further distribution was received last Friday, the 10th of January, and that was the sum of 315,000. So taking, the reason that they gave us the distribution is they completed 6 assets, the sale of 6 assets in December. And this makes the total capital payment to date of 1.276 million. That's not anywhere in the report, that's just a verbal update for you. Lothbury continues with the the disposal programme and expect to have the remaining 10 assets sold by the end of February. Members may note that they were hoping to have the assets sold by the end of December. It hasn't happened, so they are expecting by the end of February, March, they should have sold the remaining assets. On page 47, 6.23 indicates what's going on with Hermes Property Trust. We've got £1 million invested, and Hermes Property Trust are due to hold an EGM on the 30th of January to seek approval on a merger of the fund. Further updates, that's all we know at the moment. Further updates will be shared with members in due course. Staying on the same page, but on 6.28, we move on to the multi-asset funds, and this has generated just under 128,000 of investment income, representing an annualised return of 4.51%. You'll find the the Treasury Management and Annual Investment Strategy for 25-26 in Annex 5. This is page 63 of the report. And within the strategy, there's been a few minor changes, but there's also a new section has been added into the strategy to formalise training for both members and officers. This can be found in section 15, which is page 74 of the report. The idea of the section on training is to support members to ensure they have a good understanding in order to scrutinise our reports, and as well as ensuring that officers are adequately trained to carry out their Treasury duties. Just also to mention, the Treasury management function was subject to an internal audit in Q3, and I can report to this committee that we were issued with an audit opinion of high. Whilst engaging with the internal audit, we discussed how best to reflect considerations around ESG, and the outcome of this being that we're going to agree and formalise ESG within the strategy to complement the underlying principle of security, liquidity and yield for our investments. Lastly, I can confirm that the Treasury activities have complied with the Treasury limits, the prudential indicators for 24-25, and there's no breach to report to our committee. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Donna. 10 out of 10 for page numbers. Members, Councillor Parry.
Hi, I'm assuming, but would like if you could confirm. I'm pleased to see that there's about a 10 million increase in the total. I think it was, you're showing total funds invested 69 million. And when we looked in, I think it was shown in July as 59.39 million. Is that just timing? Because I know it's very much what we've had in against what we're paying out. So that's all the difference is. It's nothing. I shouldn't get too excited then. Just checking. I assumed as much.
Fergie.
On the Lothbury money, are we looking for other long-term investment opportunities for it, or are we thinking, given that we've got a bunch of big capital spending coming up, we're going to hold it in cash or near cash type assets?
Thank you, Councillor. We will be recalling the money at this moment in time, so we're not looking to take.
Anyone else? Councillor Hood. Treasury management, please, Councillor Hood.
I was going to talk about agriculture. Can I ask about at 6.2 the we're talking about the amounts that we've got in that property fund and the changes that are going on within this. Can I just have clarification about exactly what's going on? Because from my untrained eye, it looks to me as if there's some kind of problem in that fund. If 22% of the investors are trying to exit it, and this business with the gating, this is a way of the fund protecting itself, and the fact that they're trying to merge in with another one. I'm going to stop talking so you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, so the gating was to protect the fund, but that's actually shifted. This is for Hermes. Lothbury are actually winding up now. So Hermes are actually looking to find a partner compatible in order to take the fund forward, rather than being in a situation where they may have to consider winding up. So once we actually know at the end of January, we'll be happy to distribute some information on that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Clokey again.
A very small thing I spotted in Annex 5 and I think Annex 6. I spotted when I was skimming through, and there's some references to Deluc. Do we just need to update those to the new name for the ministry?
Okay, well spotted. And if everyone's happy. So on page 41, we're recommending this to Cabinet. Note the Treasury Management and adopt the Treasury Management and Annual Investment Strategy at Annex 5. Do I have your support? Thank you very much. For those watching, that was agreed by the committee. Annual Audit Report, page 93, Mrs. Shelton.
I think Paul's actually going to take this one, if that's all right.
Mr. Warden.
Thank you, Chairman. In addition to the audit report that accompanies the statement of accounts, Grant Thornton are required to conduct a review of the council's arrangements to secure economy, efficiency and effectiveness. This report gives a précis of the findings contained in Annex 1, which is page 97 of your agenda. The previous report covering 22-23 raised weaknesses in relation to key performance indicators and procurement, both of which have been included within the strategic risk register over the last year for member review. This report actually covers the 23-24 financial year. The work undertaken on the key performance indicators has been recognised by our auditors as no longer considered to be a weakness, so that's one good tick. We've moved on from that. Moving on to procurement, however, as I've mentioned, the report covers 23-24. We didn't enter the partnership with the Mid-Kent procurement team until May 24. Therefore, it falls outside of that financial year. So therefore, it remains as a key weakness on the report, but the auditors have recognised that we have made significant progress since the end of this financial, the end of the 23-24 financial year, and the time of them writing the report. And hopefully that will mean that it will come off the report for 24-25, which will be starting in the next few months. There are a small number of improvement recommendations in the Annex 1. These, along with the management response, can be found in pages 131 to pages 137 of your agenda papers. Most of these recommendations have been dealt with by officers because they are run-of-the-mill operational type of matters, but one area requiring additional member involvement also forms part of the audit findings report, which is in the statement of accounts report, which you're going to be receiving from Amanda next. And it concerns the area of related party transaction and member declarations. As part of the process at the end of every financial year, we send out forms to all members covering related party transactions, and we ask you to tick that you have a use of a laptop or a use of a iPad, which is provided by the council, whether you have any involvement with any businesses that do business with the council, whether you've received any grants from the council from sort of thing. And we get those back, and we chase your group leaders to say, can you please chase these up, etc., etc. But we have recently had a small number not being returned to us. Now, previously, this was okay because if we got anything above 44, we're 44 members. If we got anything above 40, we think, right, that's good. Our auditors are slightly changing tack on this now. They want to get 100% return back in order to ensure that everything is covered and there's no potential risk to the council. So they're recommending that we have a review. So what I've put in the management response is I'd like members of this committee, as you guys receive the final reports from the auditors and you're charged with governance in respect of the financial statement, to consider how the best way of doing this is. So I've kind of put the ball back into your court. I do apologise for that. So whilst you're sitting there pondering that, I'm going to hand over to Lucy Nutley from Grant Thornton, who's our senior audit manager. Unfortunately, Sophie, who is our engagement lead, is at Maidstone tonight, dealing with a plethora of problems with them, I suspect. So I'll hand over to Lucy now, and she can go through the report in a bit more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I'm delighted to be here this evening, albeit virtually, presenting our auditor's annual report for 23-24. I won't say a huge amount. Paul has really covered the main points in the report, but I do wish to kind of bring to your attention that the council has clearly worked very hard on the key recommendations we raised last year. And you know, you've taken everything seriously, worked hard to respond to the recommendations, with the effect that one key recommendation has been achieved and the other one will more than likely go next year, as Paul said. The Value for Money team have expressed their thanks through me for all who have been involved in the process. You have been incredibly helpful as we've reached the conclusions of our work. I'm not going to talk very much. Paul's kind of given the highlights, but the key page for you is page 9 of our report, which is 102 in the pack, where you see the 2 horizontal arrows, that there's been no change in the direction of travel, and an improvement in the direction of travel for improvement in the 3 E's area, which is where we'd raised the key recommendations. We have raised a number of improvement recommendations. This is really, they are improvement recommendations, and we're delighted that all of them have been accepted by the council. Really positive. I'm aware of the length of the agenda pack, so I'm not going to say any more. I'll pause there for questions. I will note that I didn't undertake the work myself, so I may need to come back on some questions, but I'll do my very best.
Thank you very much. Members. Quiet. Quiet. Oh, Councillor Hood. Audit report, Councillor Hood, audit.
It would be nice to be able to make a contribution without some kind of preamble before I speak. Obviously we've had a huge.
Councillor Hood, I am the chairman at the moment, and you have been known in the past to wander off the subject. Carry on, Councillor.
Obviously, there's been a lot of progress. There's been a great deal of work, and we've managed to procure a procurement service. That's brilliant. We're making progress in all the other areas. I'm scratching my head about how we can answer the challenge that's been handed to us by Mr. Worden. That's going to be a much harder one. Yeah, that's so basically we've got to get 100%. We've got to get every single member's paperwork back in order to. Yeah, okay. And that's our job. You know, it certainly is in our court. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hood. Councillor Bishop.
Are reaching, but if forms aren't back with the date, are the members, would they be suspended? Council meeting.
Someone like to try and answer that?
I don't think that is a remedy that we could use. I think one remedy that we could use, well, it's not a remedy, it's a naming and shaming, frankly. You actually print the person's name in the account to say they didn't comply.
We have a very different situation with regard to members. In the interest of all the leaders, to ensure that their members were able to attend numbers.
Yeah, good point. Let's just think about this for a moment, if I may. The party transaction form is the form that you send out when?
That normally comes out the last week of March, and we normally ask you to return that normally around about the Easter weekend at the latest.
Right. And on that form, there's a box you tick to say that your register of interests, which is published on the website, is correct. And I would like to think that we can pressurise our colleagues to ensure that, first of all, that form is correct, because that can get forgotten. At the end of that form, it does say it is a criminal offence not to supply said information within the period of time when things change on that form. So if we'll all tell our friends to do that, it's a start. And then we need to check that everyone's done the party transaction. So spread amongst your friends, and maybe we can help Mr. Warden do this. Right then, anyone else want to say anything else? James, Mr. Councillor Pokey again.
I was just thinking on that form matter, and is there a possibility if people haven't filled it in, ideally we want everyone to fill it in digitally, but can you just grab people at a full council meeting? So I'm assuming most people, their response is, I've got an iPad, I have no further updates to give. Can you give them a piece of paper and say, tick here, sign here?
We do that. Either we try to get them in for if there's a council in April. If not, we certainly try to do it for annual council. The problem we have is it's not necessarily me who's dealing with this, it's Amanda now who's dealing with this. Amanda's got until the end of May to get those accounts ready for publication. And forgive me for saying this, but making tweaks at the last minute, it's not very easy to do on a document of that size and that magnitude. So that's the reason why. So the tendency is the reminder goes out, and if you've received one from us, which I don't think any member of this committee has, it does say this will be the final reminder we will issue. Unfortunately, that won't be the final reminder we will issue now, because our auditors are now telling us we've got to get everybody's back. So as Sharon said, one of the alternatives is we name and shame. We don't name and shame at the moment. There is a possibility we could put that in, but this will be a decision for members to make rather than officers. So hence the reason why I was asking for the guidance. Ideally, we could. We've got a meeting in April, haven't we? So we could actually bring it back to April if necessary, just to give members a brief update on that if necessary.
Councillor Hood.
I've actually been when I was the group leader, I've been in this room and I've handed out these forms and cajoled councillors into doing this. Can we lock the doors?
Something that can be referred to standards committee, because that's would be a form of naming and shaming.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're all going to tell our friends to fill those forms in. So on page 93, if we're all happy, there are 4 recommendations, and these are consider and approve, note the comments, note and endorse, and make any specific recommendations to Cabinet in light of the annual report. I've heard nothing from anybody, though. We won't be doing that. Do I have your support? Thank you very much. That was agreed by committee. Okay, page 149, statement of accounts, audit findings report. Mr. Warden.
Before I hand over to Amanda, I just want to go through the report. Sharon and I just want to give our thanks to the accountancy team and the support from others in financial services. It's just not the accountancy team. We do get samples of invoices through, debts, council tax bills, council tax arrears, business rate bills, housing benefit, everything under the sun, and we farm that out as much as we possibly can. Normally, we would have had this concluded in September, but because of the backlog that's around the country, everybody, with the exception of one authority in the county, was pushed back quite significantly. And it meant that we have been parallel running the entire audit process. At the same time, we have been preparing your budgets, which you will be receiving next week. This has been no mean task, and I have to say thank you to the team, and particularly to the 2 ladies in front who have actually, when I've said, can you get this done, have got it done when I've needed to. So I would like, if possible, if the committee could give their thanks to the team as a whole, it would go an awful long way with the powers that be. Thank you. And I'll hand over to Amanda now to deal with the rest of the report.
Just before you do that, Paul, from the chair, I would like to ask Sally to put some words down using words monumental and lots of effort, and I'm sure that we can all support that.
In that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kirky. If you could do that, Sally, for us, please. Thank you very much. Amanda.
Thank you, Chair. The report covers the conclusion of the audit of the accounts, the draft statements presented to members back in July. Annex 1 to the report, which can be found on page 155, gives the latest version of the financial statements. where there have been some minor changes to the narratives and numerical changes to the notes to the accounts. However, there have been no changes to the 4 core financial statements. Annex 2 to the report can be found on page 235 of your agenda packs. This is the draft audit findings report that was issued by Grant Thornton in December. Members will note that the engagement lead anticipates being able to issue an unqualified audit opinion on the financial statements following this meeting, and they will provide a verbal update at this meeting after I've finished. Page 22 of the audit finding report, which is found on page 256 in the agenda papers, gives 2 recommendations: the non-return of related party transaction forms by councillors and the regular review of brought forward creditor balances. Paragraph 5.4 on page 151 gives details of the management responses to both of these recommendations. Members can also note that 2 of the 3 prior year audit recommendations have now been removed. Annex 3 to the report, starting on page 265, is the letter of representation, which is a declaration from the Section 151 officer and the chairman of the Audit Committee to say that no financial matters have arisen since the end of the accounting period which could have a bearing on the long-term financial stability of the council. I'm pleased to report that there have been none. Members are asked to consider the recommendations in paragraph 3.1, page 149 of the agenda, and we will add the chairman's signature to the accounts and the letter of representation once officers have received the final audit opinion. I'll now hand over to Becky from Grant Thornton, who joins us online to provide an update.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. From our side, just to really come into point to what Paul has alluded into, we are really pleased to present our audit findings report for the council under normal conditions amid all the backstop audits across many bodies in the country. I would like to really express our appreciation for the assistance provided by the finance team and other staff members within the council during this audit period. It was really fruitful because the council really engaged with the audit team. The council submitted really strong draft account for audit, and these were supported by really detailed working papers, which enabled most of the work to move smoothly. This is really evidenced by the fact that, like Amanda has just mentioned, there were no adjustments into the general reserves of the council from our audit. We had multiple disclosure adjustments that were taken care of, and in the final version by management have been updated. Just on page 7 of the report, which on the pack is 241. I just want to highlight to members that we've updated our lower materiality during the audit. We are required to update you on this. Our update was just on the last point, which is materiality for specific transactions and balances. This is particularly related to senior officers. Our view is that these disclosures have become more sensitive. So we've considered lowering the threshold for all errors identified in relation to senior officers' remuneration to report them to members. However, there were no issues subsequently identified from this and none to report. If I can just briefly touch on page 242 on 242 on the pack to 244. This is the risk that we presented in our audit plan at the start of the audit. All of these risks we're able to perform our procedures necessary, and we're able to conclude without any issues noted. If I can just go further down, that should be page 256, Chair. These are the points that have been touched on by both Paul and Amanda, and we've noted these ones as points that are being actioned by the council, and we are happy that the council has received this with really good spirit, and they are willing to work with us and work into our recommendations on these. Amanda has highlighted we've already noted good progress and closing of those that were identified in the prior, which is in page 257. We do note some audit adjustment in 258, page 258 of the pack. Those adjustment, members, if I can highlight, were not adjusted for, and this is just because they were identified as a result of differences in estimation and they were immaterial for us. So in terms of the audit process, we are comfortable with these adjustments not made into the account. And I think I will want to just touch a bit on the representation letter. The management representation letter, which is from page 265. We have not made any. We've not made specific request and specific representation here, but we did note just one item in relation to one case that is just like an industry development. It's not particularly related to the council. This is in relation to a pension scheme issue around Virgin Media case. So management have done the work that we requested, and they've reported appropriately in terms of this item. I think once we just receive the subsequent event inquiries, we've communicated with management and the management representation letter. We've already received the final version of the account. The audit team will be looking to issue an audit opinion, which is unqualified. This is anticipated either in the next 24 hours to 48 hours to be completed. I will just pause in just there, and hopefully we've covered all that we needed to cover.
Thank you very much.
Thank
10
you,
out of
Chair.
10, both of you, for page numbers again. Members. You've all done such a good job. There are no questions. Exactly. Right. Okay.
Sorry, Chair.
Oh,
Yeah,
Councillor Bishop.
I'll just say that. I mean, we get this each year, but it does follow a format, and they do a very good job, as you said earlier. We're pleased that actually we be confident about Thornton.
Thank you, Councillor Bishop. Nice words. So everyone's happy then. Page 149. We've got 3 bullet points. We are recommending, once fully agreed, approve the audit findings and approve the letter of representation, including the thanks to the team. Do I have your support?
Agreed.
Agreed.
That was agreed for those online. Thank you very much. Page 269. Counting policies. Amanda.
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out the Council's proposed accounting policies to be used in the preparation of the 24-25 accounts. These accounting policies have been included at Annex 1 on page 273 of the agenda pack. Highlighted in the report are changes that the Council were required to introduce following the introduction of International Financial Reporting Standard 16, which is a new standard for leases. IFRS 16 introduces a new right of use asset class to the balance sheet from 24-25 onwards and recognises the corresponding lease liability. This applies to all leases, regardless of asset type. The changes are not expected to have a material impact to the Council's accounts. However, work is continuing to ensure the Council is complying with all aspects of this standard. Other than this, the policies remain largely unchanged from previous years, but I'm happy to take any questions on any of the policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Members? Unhappy? One is happy. Okay, thank you. So at 3.1 on page 269, there is a recommendation there. Do I have your support? That is supported by the committee. Thank you very much. Page 287, review of anti-fraud, bribery, corruption policy and whistleblowing policy. Mr. Ward, I'm going to start this one. Mr. Flannery. Miss James.
I'm online, Chair. So thank you. So this is the annual review of the anti-fraud, bribery and corruption policy and a review of the whistleblowing policy, which are attached annexes of the report. The main changes within the anti-fraud and bribery and corruption policy is the new legislation that has been brought in around failure to prevent fraud. TNBC, as the size and scope of the organisation, is within scope of that legislation, and this policy brings in some of the requirements that we will, as an organisation, have to complete in order to prepare any reasonable defence if we are unfortunate enough to be a victim where someone has committed fraud that benefits Tunbridge and Moreland Borough Council rather than benefits themselves. Tunbridge, by virtue of the way that we do business, Tunbridge and Moreland Borough Council is quite low risk in this area, but nonetheless, we do need to go through and do a risk assessment to confirm that. We have until September 2025 to complete that work, and the counter fraud team will be working with management to deliver that through this year. There's been no real changes in the whistleblowing policy and procedure, so happy to take any questions from members.
Thank you, James. Members. Councillor Hood.
Well, it's a legal requirement, isn't it? Thank you very much, James, for your outstanding work as usual. But it's the same. Thank you very much.
Councillor Hood for the thanks. Anyone else? No one else. Page 287. 1, 2, 3 recommendations there at 3.1. Do I have your support? Agreed. That was agreed by the committee. Thank you very much. Moving on to page 333, matters for information. Internal audit and counter fraud progress report. Mr. Benjamin.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll introduce the internal audit part of the report, and my colleague James will introduce the counter fraud section. So this is a progress report for work undertaken between September and December 2024. The report includes some of the main features of the report. The report includes 7 audits that have been completed and issued as final or draft reports, and the summaries can be found on page 345. Of the 7 reports, of the 7 summaries contained in this report, 1 being Treasury Management, as previously mentioned, receives a high assurance rating. There's 1 single low-level issue raised to do with formalising ESG considerations within the Treasury strategy. 4 audits received a substantial opinion and 1 an adequate opinion. And again, those summaries can be seen on page 345. The final report, the final summary in the pack was the advisory piece that was completed on the Agile system, specifically the APAS module. This was advisory, so there's not lessons learned reviews, there's not an assurance rating provided this audit report. But on page 352, you can see a list of some of the areas that were raised as part of the lessons learned, and there are 23 points there with management actions against them. Since the completion of that work, it's been agreed to include a further review of the programme. And as such, there has been an addition to the internal audit plan for this year. The additional review replaces the review on the local plan, which will be deferred to the following year. And as previously mentioned, planning for that additional Agile review is due at the end of January. Currently, 35% of the internal audit plan has been completed. There's 35% currently in progress, which leaves 30% yet to start. That work is scheduled and is due to be completed to inform the annual internal audit report, which will be presented to the committee in July. The report also gives an update of the implementation of management actions raised by internal audit. In total, there were 39 actions that were due in this round of follow-ups. Of these, 90% are either being completed or are in progress. That leaves 10% that have either not been started or that we're still awaiting updates from the business. Some of these actions are relating to the implementation of Agile, and that is the reason for the delay. On page 342, I have just highlighted 3 outstanding recommendations. These are the longest standing recommendations that we currently have and are from the 2020-21 year. Of these 3 actions, 2 of them have new implementation dates towards the end of the year, and we will follow them up and report back to the committee on progress against them. The 3rd one is due for a re-audit in the current plan. And discussing this with the head of service, he feels that there are some mitigating actions now in place that aren't necessarily the recommendation that we raised originally, but they do mitigate the risk. So these will be covered during the re-audit. And just finally, I would like to note that the Internal Audit and Counter Fraud team won the Excellence in Public Sector Audit at the recent SIT for Public Finance Awards. So it was a proud moment for members of the team, and it just reflects the work they complete. Happy to take any question.
Councillor Clerkey.
Thank you. First, congratulations on the award. On the agile review, I mean, looking at the issues identified, a lot of them are sort of it's a software project. These things happen kind of thing. I suppose my question is less how can we prevent them from occurring, and how might we have been able to detect those problems earlier within the project life cycle? So things like we needed more specific skills, resources, project management, etc. How could we have identified earlier that things were going off track and taken action?
I think from the review, it was quite clear that that kind of project monitoring and achievement of milestones and monitoring wasn't in place during the early stages of the project. Discussing this with management, there's a lot within there along the monitoring of the programme that has been taken forward and been implemented in the implementation of places. So obviously we're doing an additional review on that upcoming, and we'll see how they've been implemented.
Councillor Hood.
Thank you very much. Looking at the climate change one, TM11 on page, what's that, 347? Where it talks about the climate change forum and it demonstrates active engagement with partners and stakeholders, community feedback, etc. It doesn't seem to. It only reports back to the council once a year. It doesn't seem to. It doesn't really have that kind of interactive aspect to it. I'm quite surprised to read that. The fact that it holds its meetings in private, and then when we look, obviously you've in the areas for development, you quite rightly identified the second item: emissions from scope 3 remain high. Lift change from the baseline, underscoring the need for targeted interventions. I think a great deal of those scope 3 emissions are to do with commuting. And the fact that this location is completely unsustainable. It's not on a proper bus route, and it's not served by a railway station. So it's difficult to see how that can be improved. So I just wanted to raise those points about the climate change forum, that it can do a lot more to spread the word and to communicate with the world outside of its meetings. And obviously, congratulations, well done to the whole audit team from Kent County Council. They've done an amazing job over many years. It's literally.
Just to come back on your point, Councillor Hood, I'm quite happy to look at all the detail in the report about the forum and the judgments about supporting that. As far as the second point, emissions of scope 3. There is a management action in place for that that's been agreed with the business, and there's some using grant funding. There's significant projects happening at the moment with leisure centres for that.
Thank you. Is James commenting on counter fraud?
Thank you, Chair. The only thing I'd like to add is just make members aware of a slight typo on page 343, where the Council Auditors team have collated the data specified by the Cabinet Office for the 2024-25 exercise, not the 22-23. We've completed the 22-23 exercise, but we've just submitted the data for the 24-25, which includes a range of different data sets which we match against in order to identify potential irregularities. An update on that will come to the next committee on what matches we've received and how we are clearing them.
Thank you very much. This is an information item, so all we have to do is note it. However, maybe we could just, the committee could just recognise the award achieved and send our congratulations. You write something like that, please, Sally? Thank you very much, Sally. Okay, so we've noted that. I have nothing under item 13. I have nothing under 14, and I have nothing under 15. Therefore, at 8:46, I can close the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance, safe driving home, and thank you for officers attending tonight.